Have you ever had that nagging feeling that something is out of place but you can't quite put your finger on it? As if deep down, every decision you made hadn't come completely from you. As if an invisible hand had guided your steps, shaped your responses, programmed your reactions. Maybe you did favors you didn't want to do, gave in to arguments you were sure were right, trusted people who later revealed a side you never imagined. What if I told you that this isn't bad luck or coincidence or naivety? It's manipulation. Yes, you are being manipulated. We all are. Daily. For friends, for colleagues, for loved ones, for smiling strangers, and even for larger structures that we don't even notice acting. And the most perverse? We don't even notice. Modern manipulation doesn't come in the form of hypnosis or spy movie brainwashing. She doesn't need machines, drugs, or cinematic tricks. It is much more subtle, much more dangerous. It happens when you believe you are deciding for yourself, when the yes you say feels like yours, but isn't, when the guilt you feel for refusing something has been planted in you like a silent seed. This type of manipulation is not harmful. She seduces, it involves, and above all, she convinces. We live trapped in a kind of emotional board game that we didn't choose to play, and worse, we don't even know we're participating. When we try to get out of the game, something holds us back. A vague feeling of guilt, a cloud of doubt, a fear that seems irrational but is real. We are emotionally conditioned not to resist. From an early age, we learn that pleasing is a virtue, that refusing is selfishness, that doubting others is paranoia. And that's why, when someone starts moving us like pieces, we don't scream. We accept, we internalize, we justify, and we keep smiling. If you're thinking right now that doesn't happen to me, stop. Breathe. Because that thought is exactly what a good manipulator wants you to have. He needs you to believe you are in control. It needs you to think you are safe, that your mind is impenetrable. And in the meantime, your limits are being pushed millimeter by millimeter, until one day you wake up and realize that you no longer know where your desires end and the desires of the other begin. This video is not here to offer you comfort. Comfort is what you have when you believe everything is okay. This video is a call to action, a call to raw and real awareness, a dive into what few want to see, the way we are being shaped day after day, emotionally guided without realizing it. The good news? There is a way out, but it's not easy, because real freedom is not doing what you want. Real freedom is knowing why you want what you want. It's looking inside and seeing the invisible threads that still bind you to ideas, people, habits, patterns that are not really yours. A true manipulator doesn't shout, doesn't pressure, doesn't force. He watches. He studies. It identifies your patterns, your insecurities, your weak points. He notices when you need to be praised, when you are afraid of being rejected, when you feel guilty for saying no, and that's where he works. He doesn't knock on the door. He finds the crack. And enter. He reads your gestures, listens to the tone of your voice, feels your hesitation. Before you speak, he already understands you. And when he speaks, he sounds like he's saying exactly what you want to hear. And maybe it is, but not out of empathy, by strategy. Some manipulators use charm. They make you feel special, unique, different. They smile, praise, offer support, and with that, they create an emotional debt. After all, when someone is so good to you, how can you deny a favor? How to disagree with an opinion? You feel compelled to reciprocate, and that's when you start to give in. Others use guilt. They position themselves as victims. They show signs that they are overwhelmed, helpless, and misunderstood. They make you believe that you are the only one who understands them, that they can only count on you. Little by little, you feel responsible for that person's well-being. And when she tries to leave, when she sets a limit, all she has to do is sigh, give a sad look, say something vague like, "I expected more from you," and that's it. You give in again. And there are still those who use fear. These are subtle and dangerous. They don't threaten directly, create scenarios. If you do that, you'll end up alone. If you leave now, you'll never find someone like me again. They don't bind you with chains, but with phrases that turn into ideas that invade your head and settle there, like absolute truths. And then, even free, you can't leave. Even with the door open, you remain. All of this happens because there is an opening within you, an emotional gap, an unresolved desire, an old wound. And until you see this gap, you will continue to be an easy target. Worse, you will call it love, friendship, loyalty. You will confuse prison with protection, control with care. This is where we begin to dismantle this cycle, and with courage, dive into the journey of truly freeing yourself. Because manipulation only works as long as you don't realize it is happening. But from the moment you see, feel, understand, the game changes. You leave the role of a piece and take on the role of strategist. But I warn you right away, seeing hurts. And once you see it, there is no way to unsee it. This journey is for the strong, for those who are tired of bending over backwards to keep the peace, for those who no longer want to negotiate their own truth in exchange for crumbs of acceptance, for those who have decided once and for all to stop dancing to other people's music and start writing your own melody. Manipulation begins long before the first word is spoken. It does not depend on speech, but on reading. He who manipulates with mastery observes first. He doesn't act on impulse. It collects data. He listens to what you don't say. He notices the silences between your sentences, the shifts in your gaze, the rhythm of your breathing. He knows exactly when you let your guard down, when you smile out of insecurity, when you hesitate for fear of displeasing. And when he notices this, he doesn't attack you. He offers. It delivers exactly what you want most, not out of generosity, but out of calculation. This type of manipulator does not need to raise his voice. He doesn't need to threaten, he doesn't need to demand. He leads you with praise, with smiles, with promises of affection. He presents himself as someone different from the others, someone who really understands you, someone who finally sees who you are. And in that moment, you relax. And when you relax, you give up control. The truth is that we all have an emotional blind spot. We all carry, to a greater or lesser extent, a silent need. And whoever knows where it is, will know where to touch it. Some of us grew up with the idea that we would only be loved if we were useful, that affection is something you earn, not something you receive for being who you are. From an early age, we were taught that pleasing is the fastest way to receive attention, that being good is a virtue. And so, when someone treats us with affection, we feel obliged to reciprocate, not by choice, but by conditioning. And the manipulator realizes this. It offers small gestures, small validations, crumbs of recognition. And you, thirsty, give yourself in return. Others carry ancestral guilt, an inner voice that says, you can't think about yourself. You have to put others first. Saying no is selfish. These beliefs, often planted in childhood, become invisible laws, and the manipulator plays on this. He positions himself as someone who needs help, understanding, patience. He never asks directly. He suggests, he insinuates. And you step forward. You offer. You do it before he even asks. And all this because he feels he has to. There are still those who live in fear. Fear of being abandoned, rejected, forgotten. This fear, which is often born from silent experiences, a paternal absence, an unstable affection, a compliment that never came, turns into an urgency for connection. And that's where the manipulator acts. He presents himself as shelter, as security, and then he threatens to take it away. He says, no one else will understand you like that. You will never find someone who values you like I do. Without me, you will be lost. And the worst part, you believe it. Because his fear already said that before he even spoke. These emotional holes do not arise by chance. They are shaped by experiences, by absences, by traumas that we do not name. They are invisible legacies of a childhood in which we were taught to remain silent, to endure, to mold ourselves to fit in. And as long as these voids exist, as long as these wounds are open, there will be someone willing to use them. But this is nothing to be ashamed of. It's not a sign of weakness. It's simply being human. The mistake is not in feeling, but in not recognizing what we feel. The danger is not in the emotion, but in ignorance about its origin. Machiavelli, in his cold analysis of human nature, said that whoever understands people's interests and fears can govern them without needing force. And he was right. Brute force generates resistance, but emotional manipulation generates voluntary surrender. And that's why it's so efficient. She makes you offer yourself. It makes you give up your autonomy, thinking you are making a noble, generous, conscious gesture. But it isn't. You're just repeating an invisible pattern, reacting to a trigger you don't even know exists. To change this game, the first step is to look at yourself with brutal honesty. No flourishes, no justifications. Ask yourself, what makes me give in? What is the feeling that moves me when I say yes, meaning no? Is it fear, blame, desire to be accepted? Do I need to be seen as someone good, understanding, altruistic? If the answer is yes, no, you are living conditioned. And someone, somewhere, has already realized this. This realization can hurt. It can provoke anger, shame, sadness, but it can also be liberating. Because when you understand what moves you, it starts to change the game. You begin to notice when you are being led. Start putting the brakes on your impulses. Start pausing before responding. And in this space between stimulus and reaction, freedom is born. True freedom. One that does not depend on the other person stopping manipulating you, but on you stopping allowing yourself to be manipulated. And that is the central point. There is no point in wanting the world to be fairer, for people to be more honest, for manipulators to disappear. This is naivety. What works, what changes lives, is learning to protect yourself. To know yourself so deeply that no one else can use your wounds against you, transforming your needs into awareness, their voids in presence, and your pain into power. It's not about becoming cold, distant, impenetrable. On the contrary, it's about continuing to feel, but with clarity. Keep your heart open, but keep your eyes open. Knowing how to say no firmly, even when everything in you wants to say yes, so as not to disappoint. And to recognize without guilt that your integrity is worth more than any bond that requires your surrender. The manipulator is not necessarily a bad person. He could be someone injured too, someone who learned to get what they want that way. But that doesn't change the fact that your freedom is at risk, and you shouldn't sacrifice your mental health to save those who are holding you back. This is illusion, and illusion, when sustained too much, becomes prison. If so far we have talked about how the manipulator acts and why he manages to touch exactly where it hurts, it's time to turn the key. Because knowing you're being manipulated is just the beginning. True power begins when you learn to step out of automatic mode. Yes, because manipulation needs, above all, its predictability. The manipulator depends on knowing how you will react. He counts on your rush to please, your drive to protect, your eagerness for acceptance. It doesn't manipulate what is unknown. It manipulates what is standard. And your pattern, my dear, is the starting point of your liberation. The first thing to do is simple but requires courage. Observe. Observing yourself like someone watching a film without narrating it out loud, without justifying the plot, without defending the characters. Just look. When you are asked to say yes, when you feel that inner discomfort, when something in you hesitates but your mouth quickens, stop, breathe, don't react, watch. Because it is in this microspace between the stimulus and the response that your power begins to be rebuilt. You don't need to scream, or run away, or hit head-on. You just need to start noticing. And whoever notices starts to deprogram themselves. Notice which words calm you down, which ones destabilize you. What triggers pull you into the old please or give in script? Is it the fear of losing someone? Is it the memory that in the past, when you said no, you were punished with rejection? Is it the fear of appearing selfish? The emptiness that comes when someone disapproves of you? Name it. Shape. Because what has a name loses the power to dominate you through the shadows. What you face head-on begins to recede. The second stage of this journey towards emotional autonomy is something that classical authors such as Machiavelli intuited very well, albeit with another language: the strategic distancing. This does not mean coldness. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It actually means learning to create an internal space where you can see the situation without sinking into it. A conscious pause between what affects you and what you do with it. When you start to emotionally distance yourself from certain situations, you start to see the game. That exaggerated compliment that used to make you open your heart without reservation now sounds like bait. That veiled plea for help, which previously mobilized you to solve the other person's problem as if it were yours, now reveals an attempt to transfer responsibility. And that rehearsed drama, which before made you run to save someone, now only awakens compassion in you, without guilt, without obligation, without blind surrender. But be careful. This is not becoming cynical. It's becoming lucid, and in this lucidity, something powerful emerges. The unpredictability. Manipulators hate the unpredictable. They build their strategies based on emotional maps. They know that if they cry, you will comfort them. If they praise you, you will open up. That if they remain silent, you will follow. But what if suddenly you do the opposite? What if, when faced with crying, you simply respect the other person's emotion without taking responsibility for resolving it? What if, when faced with praise, you say thank you without inflating your ego? What if, faced with silence, you also remain silent and move on with your life? This break in the pattern destabilizes the game, and at that moment, the manipulator reveals himself, because without his emotional control as a tool, he loses his weapons, and then either move away or try a more direct attack. Either way, you are no longer a hostage, because emotional predictability is the first link in the chain. When you break it, the rest starts to fall apart. Another fundamental pillar in this journey is the solid identity building. When you know who you are, you don't need to prove it. When you recognize your worth, you don't subject yourself to emotional tests. When you are clear about your limits, you don't feel guilty about setting them. This sounds simple, but it isn't. Because in a world where people try to tell you who you should be, holding on to your truth is an act of resistance. From an early age, we are taught to seek external validation, waiting for praise, applause, recognition. But the truth is that as long as your self-esteem depends on the eyes of others, you will be at risk, because someone can always use it against you. When you are whole, no one completes you, and whoever doesn't complete you doesn't control you. So stop waiting for the world to tell you that you are good enough. Start to recognize yourself, building an internal foundation so firm that no matter who tries to manipulate the narrative, you are no longer lost. And that, my friend, is true freedom. Freedom that does not depend on approval, applause, acceptance. The freedom that comes from silence, that does not need to be filled. And remember, this is not a permanent state. It's practice, it's training. You will make mistakes, you will fall into traps, you will find yourself reacting as before. And that's okay. The important thing is awareness, because the more you observe yourself, the faster you recover. And every small victory, every no said calmly, every limit imposed without explanation, is a brick in the fortress that will protect you from the world of emotional games out there. Here, we are not talking about beating the other. We're talking about beating yourself, to overcome the old pattern, the old fear, the old conditioning. And every step in that direction is a step out of the invisible prison. Talking about manipulation when it comes from outside, from strangers or people with whom you don't have deep emotional bonds, is easy. Complexity begins when manipulation comes from where you least expect it. Of affection, from the house, from the heart. It could be someone who shared your childhood with you, someone you've loved for over 20 years, someone who has already helped you a lot, who has been by your side on dark days. And precisely because of this, you can't see, or don't want to see, that this person could be manipulating you. And when he finally realizes, the shock is brutal. No one wants to believe that the partner they sleep with, the father who raised them, the friend who was by their side in the worst moments, could be using emotional ties as a tool of control. But it happens. And it happens more than you imagine. Because the more intimate the connection, the harder it is to distinguish love from emotional imprisonment. The intimate manipulator does not need to lie. It just distorts. No need to ban it. He just suggests it. No need to shout. It just changes the tone. A sigh at the right moment, a look of disappointment, a do what you want full of drama, and that's it. The message has been sent. Guilt has been activated. The emotional response came. And you, once again, did what you didn't want, said what you didn't think, gave in where you didn't need to. This type of manipulation is the most dangerous because it presents itself as love. I only do this because I care about you. Can't you see I'm protecting you from yourself? If I didn't care, I wouldn't hurt so much. And you, in the desire not to lose the bond, start to shrink. You adapt. It molds itself until it gets lost. You begin to walk in silence, calculating words, anticipating reactions, avoiding conflicts. You stop speaking your mind. Stop doing what you want. Stop being who you are. And all this in the name of love. But a love that demands your submission, your guilt, your sacrifice, is not love. It's control. In families, this can come with the weight of tradition. You can't do that to your mother. You have to be grateful. We gave you everything. Gratitude used as debt is manipulation, and respect that is born from the fear of disappointing is not respect. It is emotional obedience. And none of these dynamics support a healthy relationship. At work, it can come disguised as an opportunity. You have to be loyal. No one else would give you that chance. But loyalty that prevents you from growing, that binds you to guilt, that makes you feel an eternal debt is also a control mechanism. And the cruelest thing of all is that you start to doubt yourself. You begin to wonder if you're not exaggerating, if you're not being ungrateful, cold, selfish. This doubt is the most common effect of prolonged manipulation. You spend so much time calibrating your actions to maintain harmony that one day you wake up and no longer know where the other ends and you begin. You can no longer separate what you want to do from what you were taught to do. You no longer know if what you feel is real or just a reflection of a deep fear of disappointing the one you love. Therefore, breaking these ties requires more than strength. It requires clarity. It requires accepting an uncomfortable truth. Not every bond that involves is welcoming. Some are tethers. Not every I love you carries freedom. Some carry expectations, demands, veiled blackmail. And knowing that doesn't make you a bitter person. It makes you an awakened person. But then comes the most difficult question. How to act when the manipulator is by your side every day? How can we say enough without destroying everything? How to break the cycle without breaking your heart? The answer is not simple, but it starts with a decision. To choose yourself. To decide that your emotional health, your identity, your truth are worth more than the continuity of any dysfunctional dynamic. Start with limits. Limits that do not need justification. A calm, firm, clear no. And if reactions come, and they will come, stand firm. Because whoever manipulates you will test your limits. It will provoke you. It will use silence, tears, accusations, memories. But this is not love. It is resistance to the end of control. After the limit comes exposure. Say what you see, what you feel, which is no longer accepted. Not to convince others, but to declare to yourself that you are taking control of your life. And finally, be prepared to sustain discomfort, to hear insults, to see separations, to face the fear of loneliness. But remember, this pain is temporary, not prison. Sometimes, truly loving someone means letting them face their own emptiness. It's moving away so that she realizes that she doesn't have the right to shape others through fear. It is to make it clear that a relationship without freedom is not a bond. It is dependence. And dependence will never be the basis for a healthy relationship. This is the most painful point of the journey, but it is also the most transformative, because by breaking relationships based on manipulation, you make room for real bonds, truly, with mutual respect, with freedom, and then yes, you start to experience what it's like to be with someone without having to stop being yourself. We have reached a crucial point. Understanding the game is essential, but it is not enough. Knowing how to identify manipulation, recognize your wounds, build limits, all of this is the foundation. But in a world where everything tries to influence you, from advertising on your cell phone to a colleague's comment at lunch, from a relative's loving speech to a stranger's dramatic appeal, it takes more than resistance. It takes strategy. True freedom does not only reside in protection, it is born of anticipation. The truth is that we live in an age where influence is currency, where narratives shape decisions, where whoever controls perception controls behavior. And if you still believe you're immune to it, that's when you're most vulnerable. There is no neutrality in the emotional field. If you don't occupy your internal space clearly, someone else will with intention. And to navigate this scenario, we need to stop living on automatic. Stop reacting on impulse. Stop acting to please, to avoid conflict, to maintain appearances. Manipulation feeds on your rush to respond, of your eagerness to resolve, your need to be seen as someone good. But the world doesn't need your rush. It needs your presence. Machiavelli, who so many consider merely a symbol of coldness and manipulation, actually understood something much deeper. Human beings react more to what they see than to what they are. He said that men in general judge more by their eyes than by their hands, since everyone can see but few can touch. In other words, perception is stronger than truth. And if you don't learn to take care of your emotional image, the way you present yourself, react, expose yourself. You will always be a hostage to other people's reading. This brings us to an essential principle. Learn to master the silence. Silence is not absence. It is presence with intention. When you stop explaining everything, justifying each decision, responding to each provocation, you begin to control the rhythm of the interaction. The manipulator needs emotional information to act. He needs to know what you feel, how you react, what hurts you. If you deliver everything on a platter, you are making the game easier. But if you learn to say little, to listen more than you speak, to maintain a certain conscious ambiguity, you become unpredictable. And here comes an important nuance. It's not about lying or manipulating others. It is about protect your inner core. You don't have to reveal your whole self to be authentic. You don't need to expose your pain to be truthful. Being transparent is not being vulnerable to the point of self-exposure. You can be clear without being too accessible, can be firm without being aggressive. You can be empathetic without making yourself available to everyone. And the most powerful tool of all? Emotional self-responsibility. Yes, because as long as you believe that others need to change for you to have peace, you will continue to be controlled. As long as you wait for the other person to stop manipulating, stop testing, stop putting you to the test, you will be living under their rules. Liberation begins when you understand that your answer is yours, that no one has the power to manipulate you without your unconscious permission, that the only thing you can truly control is how you position yourself, what you accept, and what you allow. The manipulator survives on his imbalance, from your lack of control, from your silence where there should be positioning and your speech where there should be a pause. It feeds on your discomfort. If you are in one piece, he loses his advantage. And being whole is the result of training. Repeat, of courage. You can learn to defend yourself clearly without closing yourself off from love. You can learn to position yourself firmly without losing tenderness. You can escape the role of emotional hostage and still maintain deep and true relationships. Because when you know yourself, regulate your emotions, and own your integrity, you don't become cold, you become free. And this freedom, it is worth saying, is silent. She doesn't need to prove anything. She doesn't need to win arguments, nor convince others of her value. She simply walks with her head held high, knowing that every choice she makes comes from a clean source. Not guilt, not fear, not a desperate need to please. In a world where everyone is trying to influence, sell, persuade, please, or impose, those who walk clearly stand out without needing to show off. And that's not arrogance. It's inner authority. That's what you're building here. Word for word, reflection for reflection. Not a new mask, not armor to isolate yourself from the world, but a stable, centered, conscious, emotional structure. Because the firmer you are on the inside, the less manipulable you will be on the outside. What if the manipulator cannot be avoided? What if he's at your house sitting at the table with you? What if it's the person you share your roof with or someone who has a direct influence on your life, like a colleague you have to work with every day, or a family member who can't just be ignored? This is the ultimate test of emotional autonomy, because it's easy to be strong when we have distance. The real challenge is to keep yourself together, while the emotional field around you constantly tries to tear you apart. The first thing to understand is that internal freedom does not depend on external context. It may seem contradictory, but it is not. There are people in oppressive environments who remain emotionally sovereign, and there are others surrounded by freedom who still live trapped inside. The difference lies in the emotional structure that was built. If you depend on others to change to make you feel good, you are still in captivity. But if you can remain centered even in the midst of manipulation, then you have already begun to free yourself. In these close and inevitable relationships, the key is in role reconstruction. Manipulation is based on the repetition of old roles. The manipulator acts, the manipulated reacts. It's a rehearsed, automatic, rigged script, and you need to interrupt this pattern, but not with direct confrontation, with rupture of predictability. Do the unexpected. If they expect you to explain yourself, be silent. If they expect you to give in, hold on. If you expect drama, give serenity. Break the emotional rhythm with presence. But be prepared. There will be resistance. Intimate manipulation is fueled by your hesitation. The manipulator tests you, and you give in. When you start to change, he gets scared. It will try to pull you back into the old role. He will accuse you of coldness, indifference, ingratitude. It will use stories from the past, memories, bonds. It will try to remind you of who you were, to stop you from being who you are becoming. And that's where you need to be firmer than ever, because what is at stake is your identity, not a passing conflict. And here comes a point that may be difficult but is liberating. You don't need to keep all the ties you have. Yes, even those of blood. Yes, even the old ones. Even those who were once important. Some relationships only survive because you give up on yourself. And holding on to something like that isn't loyalty, it's self-abandonment. In certain cases, loving someone is precisely stopping protecting that person from the consequences of their actions. It's making it clear that love exists but not in the form of submission, that affection remains, but with clear limits, that the door is open, but you will no longer kneel to keep it closed. Now, if there is no way to physically move away, for financial, family, legal reasons, then the way out is the strategic emotional isolation. Don't confuse this with coldness. Isolating yourself emotionally is maintaining an internal shield. It's not letting guilt, fear, lack enter you like they did before. It's about seeing the game and, even though you're in it, no longer participating with your heart. It is acting with conscience. It is to respond neutrally. It's about reducing the emotional energy you give out while still being respectful. A simple gesture, but it changes everything. It is possible to live alongside a manipulator without being manipulated. It is possible to continue living together without continuing to submit. This requires patience, constancy, and emotional vigilance. But it's real, and more than possible, it is necessary for your sanity. And one last essential reminder: the manipulator is not always aware of what he is doing. Many people manipulate because they learned that way, because they were never taught to communicate in a direct, respectful, adult way. They repeat what they saw. They act out of fear of losing, out of the need for control. That doesn't justify it, but explain. And understanding this can help you act with compassion, without losing your resolve. The goal is not to transform others, but to keep yourself whole, because in the end, manipulation only has space where there is fertile ground. And when you dry this soil, when you heal your wounds, strengthen your identity, break the emotional patterns that imprison you, it no longer matters who is around you. You are no longer a target. You have become consciousness. And this awareness is your most powerful weapon, because it doesn't just protect, it transforms. Where there was once fear, there is now clarity. Where there was guilt, now there is dignity. Where there was painful silence, now there is choice. And a life based on conscious choices is the true definition of freedom. Perhaps the greatest illusion we carry, and which many never break, is that we are free simply because we can choose. But how many of your choices were born from your clarity? How many arose from your inner silence, from your genuine will, from your firm center? And how many were the result of fear of disappointing, of inherited guilt, in need of acceptance? The true captivity of the mind is not imposed with chains. It is shaped with conditioned affections. It's made up of phrases we heard when we were children, of looks that taught us that, to deserve love, we had to obey. If you've come this far, if you've followed this journey until the last block, then something in you has already changed, because the simple act of seeing, really seeing, starts to loosen the threads. And perhaps the hardest thing is accepting that yes, you were manipulated, not once, not by a Machiavellian villain with a crazy plan, but by ordinary people, by social structures, for poorly told stories, and by yourself, repeating unconscious patterns. But there is immense power in owning it, because what is unconscious controls you. What is conscious, you can transform. Now you know, the manipulator needs your predictability. It depends on your fear of displeasing, from your impulse to justify, your rush to explain, your urgency to maintain relationships at any cost. But when you breathe, observe, silence, choose, the game loses strength. The controls that used to move you now beat and return. You see, but you don't enter. And this is the turning point. You can, and should, become a strategic presence in the world, not to dominate anyone, not to manipulate in response, but to live consciously in a world that constantly tries to put you to sleep. Most people live emotionally anesthetized. They don't know the reason for their decisions. They repeat patterns, react, explode, remain silent, and in this state of torpor, they become easy targets. But you no longer need to be among them. Now you can observe what happens around you without letting yourself be swallowed up. You can move away from those who insist on invading your limits. You can cultivate silence as a shield, pause as a weapon, and lucidity as a ladder. And it can, above all, protect your peace as the most precious asset there is. Because in the end, all manipulators want is unrestricted access to their center. And when this center is shielded, there is no praise, threat, or blackmail that moves you. And here we come to the moment to extend a different invitation to you. Not to passively consume content, but to participate, to add up, to build together with other people who are also awakening, who also got tired of living as emotional hostages, who also want clarity, depth, truth. So if this video touched you, subscribe to the channel. But not just as another click. Do this as an act of alliance with your freedom, as a symbol that you are committed to staying awake, even when the entire world insists on putting you to sleep. And more. Share your story with us in the comments. Tell us at what point in your life you realized you were being manipulated. Or, if you feel like you're caught in some emotional web, say where it hurts. Speak without shame, without a filter. Because here, speech is the first cut in the threads. And listening to the community is what turns pain into strength. We want to know, what did you learn with this journey? What touched you the deepest? Which excerpt resonated with something you experienced in silence? This exchange is what keeps us alive, lucid, strong. Here we are no longer pieces. We are consciousness. We are presence. We are silent resistance in a world that screams narratives all the time. And if you want to continue climbing this ladder of clarity, I invite you to the next video. It is more than a continuation. It is a new step. Because knowledge is not an arrival point. It's a path. And every time you choose to follow, a new thread breaks. And you, step by step, stop being a puppet and become master of your own stage. See you there. And until that next meeting arrives, stay with this truth. You no longer need to be manipulated to be loved, nor bend to be accepted. You just need to be whole.